John, I am super excited for today's guest. We finally have a biologist on the show, and I want to ask him what a woman is. How you doing tonight, John?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's good that we're going to be able to get to the heart of the matter on some of the more pressing issues. And it's a big honor to introduce our guest for this show, JJ Couey. JJ, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Welcome,
Yeah,
JJ.
no problem. Thank you, making it easy for me to smile at the beginning there. That was a great opening.
Yeah.
Hope you're not going to
we'd
put
love
me
to.
too much to the test right now, because the woman is a very complicated subject nowadays.
I'm sure.
Indeed.
But you being a biologist, we should ask you a question about law, but we'll save that for another show. We're going to, first of all, during this YouTube segment, get to know JJ a little bit. People can go to his website, gigaohmbiological.com. You can check out his research and the archives there. JJ's an extremely interesting guy, and we're going to be getting in depth on a wide range of topics when we go to the sponsor exclusive segment at 7:30 on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. John, JJ, where do we want to begin with this story? How did you guys first meet? Why are we having JJ on tonight?
Yeah, why don't I tee that up and then we'll turn it over to JJ. I was introduced to JJ and JJ was introduced to me by Steve Kirsch. I don't know, a week or two ago, right? I had this opportunity a couple of weeks ago to sit down with Steve, and I shared with him a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of new stuff. And you guys can find that on Rumble. It was a little bit too hot to share on YouTube. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you'll find these interviews on Rumble on the I Am John Cullen channel. So Steve and I sit down, and we were probably talking for 2 hours or something, and the audience who watches our show regularly knows that I tend to focus on the maps and the geographic aspect of the pandemic and then the data coming out of the CDC and the WHO. So I'm sharing all that stuff with Steve, and I think at the end of the session, he was somewhat stunned. And I guess he reached out to JJ and said, can you do me a favor? I'm paraphrasing. JJ's going to fill in for us and tell us what actually happened. But I'm guessing he asked JJ, do me a favor, can you look at this guy's work and tell me, am I out of my mind, or is this guy onto something, or is this just nuts? And so next thing I know, I get an invite from JJ to meet him and a whole bunch of professors and PhDs from all over the world. And we recently sat down and reviewed the data. And so I thought it'd be great to have JJ come on and tell the audience about his background, the group of people he had been working with. There's this group that, quite frankly, I was a little jealous that I never got a phone call from Drastic. But then I remembered I don't publish my phone number, so I couldn't blame them too much. But there was this group called Drastic at the beginning, and they were doing all this research, and I think JJ was affiliated with them, so I'm going to let him tell you about that. But we spent some time together, a couple hours together the other day with a bunch of researchers, and JJ was very generous with his time setting that up, looking at all the data. So for this session, I thought it'd be interesting, after he gives you guys some background, to look at some of the stuff we reviewed the other day and get some feedback from JJ. You know, what are some of the thoughts on some of these things? And so that's kind of the setup. That's how we were introduced. That's how we met. So JJ, maybe you can give us from your perspective. I guess you got a phone call or an email from Steve Kirsch one day saying, you know, there's this guy with a hat and glasses.
There's a guy with a hat and glasses. Yes, that's correct. I didn't hear anything about bear hunting. I didn't hear anything about a Coast Guard captain. I just heard hat and glasses. So I've been behind the scenes with a number of people for a long time. I'm like a sit-in member of a lot of groups, like a lot of people are, just to try and follow the story around the world and try to see what people are thinking. So there's a group called Doctors for COVID Ethics. There's this group that Steve Kirsch leads, the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. And they have a steering committee that I've been sitting in on for, I don't know how many months now, not very long. And in that capacity, I didn't see the video with you and Steve before he called me and introduced, or gave me the idea that I should meet you. And so I agreed to it. The people that you met with your data and for Zoom, were people from Panda, also people that sit in with Steve Kirsch.
Sorry,
So sorry, go
Panda?
ahead. Yeah,
Well,
Panda is
Panda.
this organization from, I think it was founded in South Africa by a guy by the name of Nick Hudson.
But
Although he
but
could be UK, South Africa. I'm not really. I think
but
he's
what is
South.
that? Is that a hacker thing? Panda? I
No,
don't know if
Panda
I'm sorry
is
to interrupt the story.
no. It's a pandemic data analysis group.
Huh.
It's another group, but it was founded by people who primarily are not biologists, but are mathematicians and actuaries. Really, were the first founders of that group, and they
Before we
have
move
some
off of it,
ecologists
I
and
just want to
biologists
share something
involved
with
now.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You remember, of course, Seth Rich, the DNC employee who was allegedly killed in a robbery. They've dedicated a bike rack outside the DNC office building, and there's a picture of it. It says, "This bike rack is dedicated to Seth Rich, son of Omaha, fierce fighter for voting rights, devoted Democrat, friend to all, including Panda," which was thought
That's
to be
weird.
some hacker thing.
No, this is a different group, but that's okay.
Sorry.
Pet name.
No problem. So these guys met, and I think that we had a good selection of healthy skeptic people. And I think the nice thing about it was that the data that you bring, I think, underscores the amount of data washing that can happen, the amount of data manipulation that can occur, and none of this was, in a broad sense, surprising to any of the people in that audience. Maybe just the blatant obviousness of it in data that they otherwise might have looked at themselves had they thought it would just stand out like that.
Well, why don't we tell the audience a little bit about your background and why Steve trusts you so much? Why did he turn to you to set this thing up? And maybe, after we share a little bit about your background in biology and neurobiology, maybe a little bit about, how this drastic group got together in the beginning. Because again, I was watching from the outside looking in and going, you guys don't want to know anything about the map? You don't want to talk about Beijing? I was kind of shocked I didn't get an email. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your background in biology? Because I think, that's really impressive.
I have been or was an academic neurobiologist for about 22 years, I guess. I moved over to the Netherlands in 2002 and did my PhD in Amsterdam. And then I moved to Norway where I did my first postdoc. And then I tried to get tenure in the Netherlands after that. And then didn't get enough grant money. You know how that goes. And so I moved to the University of Pittsburgh as a research assistant professor in the Department of Neurobiology, doing my same thing that I'm always very good at doing, running a microscope, basically. And I really enjoy teaching. I did one neurobiology course at Carnegie Mellon, and I really enjoyed it, but there's not enough time to do that as a research guy. And so I figured out a way to do it. I was biking back and forth from the University of Pittsburgh. It was like 9.5 miles, and it was on an electric bike. So I had a good speed, and it was a good video. And I was taping it for security purposes, like in case I got hit by a car or something. And it suddenly dawned on me that if I just got a better camera and recorded it, I could just talk about the paper that I was going to cover in my journal club on my bike. I could make a YouTube channel about that. And at first it was kind of a joke, but it started to really take off, and it started to become a habit of every time I went home from work, like 3 nights a week, I was making a video, and it was just a release.
When did you start? When did you start doing this?
I guess it was August of 2019. So it was really right. I was getting all my camera stuff ready to go and getting it all into a routine right before the pandemic started. So it was kind of serendipity that I had it going so well.
What's the name of the channel?
It was JC on a Bike on YouTube, and most of the videos are still up there. I just kind of stopped posting there because I don't want it to get dinged. All of the coronavirus videos that I did in the beginning are still there. Mostly, I think, because I was extremely speculative and going for worst case scenario, which they don't mind at all.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I did that, and I got a little attention from the administration at the University of Pittsburgh and elsewhere. And I'm not very good at keeping a cool head at times. And they used that as an excuse to take my ID and keys and not allow me to come back. And then after about 9 months of me being
Whoa. They took your ID and keys because you made a video?
No, because we got into verbal communication about the video, which included
Yeah.
that I shouldn't be doing it and that I don't know what I'm talking about and that,
Yeah.
Wow.
it's not my expertise.
So they took
And
away your keys?
well, what they did was they sent me an email which says you don't need to come into the university anymore and you can send in your badge.
Wow.
Actually,
Whoa.
But that sounds like it is
And-
about the video. Forgive my ignorance, JJ. What is neurobiology? Stuff with the brain, I guess?
yes, it is. That's correct. And most of that stuff is either done in primates or in mice. And I'm primarily a mouse guy, although at the University of Pittsburgh, one of the things that I did in Rotterdam was work on excised human tissue from like cancer patients that are having a large ball of their head removed. There's some cortex there that you're going to throw it in the garbage anyway.
Right.
And so I was
So
doing
they trim
some
it off the cancer, so you get
Right.
a little bit of the cortex material trimmed off the cancer, and you get to work with that.
Yeah. And that was
Nice.
something that not very many people were doing. And so that they had the idea that if I came here, I could also help them set up something with their monkeys. And it was all going really well. There was no reason for them. There was no reason for them to take this stance, except for the fact that I was, for example, going in the back door still with my bike. But I was technically during the pandemic not allowed to do that anymore. I was supposed to go into the front door and take my temperature and get a sticker on
Wow.
my thing and put my mask on. But because I was sweaty and everything, I still just went in through the service entrance. And at some
Mhm.
point, that also became a point of contention that I wasn't following COVID guidelines, and so I was putting the whole institution in danger. As
Oh,
a,
boy.
and it was there were a lot of different ways that they took the angles.
Basically, you
Wow.
can't sit with us. We don't like what you're talking about. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, something like that. It was pretty. It had a lot to do with who. I don't want to out anybody, but it had a lot to do with the particular people involved because
Hmm.
some of them were more, let's say, hypochondriac than others, and
Right.
so you have. I happen to have a few people in my immediate circle of people that were extremely scared at that time and unwilling to listen and unwilling to watch my video and unwilling to basically have a conversation about the fact that maybe everything you're being told on television isn't entirely true. And that was really frustrating for them. I don't know. I was always aware that I was a bit of outside the norm in academia, but this really escalated out of control so fast because the defending of the television and the defending of the New York Times, it was very impressive, and it occurred with all of my colleagues, and they're still there. None of
So
them
would you
have
say
woken up.
would you say that speaking up and just voicing your opinions about what was happening may have cost you a pretty significant chunk out of your career here? It sounds like this is a pretty significant setback.
No, it's
Yeah.
not a setback. I'm done because it's academia, right? I'm publishing with the
Your
university.
career is over.
I had papers going and data that needs to be analyzed and organized and written up. That just all ended.
That's
And
So
they're
your
not
career
going
was
to give me a
basically over.
recommendation to go anywhere else. And moving through the academic, sphere is something that's all about networking and getting a recommendation and having the right, brownie points. And I have none anymore.
So hang on a second.
Unless
You've
I go
just
back to
unlocked
Norway.
something.
Okay.
You've just unlocked something for us, JJ. Because first of all, you said you had to leave your position in Europe because you didn't get enough grant money. You know how that goes. Now, I've never applied for a grant, so I don't exactly know how that goes, but I presume if you don't have money, you can't continue with your project. But what you're laying out for us is, if you are a scientist who steps outside the lines, paints outside the box, thinks in a way that maybe conventional wisdom finds radical, but history tells us these are the people who make discoveries and who invent things. They thought Copernicus was crazy, didn't they? So if you don't fall in line, you get kicked the hell out. And that's how we get this homogenized research, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I do know that that at this time there was an incredible constriction on what was allowed to be said in a way that should have seemed more foreign than it was to everybody that was experiencing it. And that's part of, what made it extra disturbing from the perspective of being on the other side of it, that people didn't even understand that it was happening really. They just went along with it. And it is, it is shocking, but one thing it really revealed is that there are people in academia who are very comfortable with what they know because nobody else knows it, and so they feel very, very safe in their own little secure blanket of their own little niche of biology. But once you start to ask them general questions about bioethics, or what do you think about this, they're very quick to hedge that's not my expertise, I don't really know much about that, I leave that to the other people. And that's a lot of how we got here. I mean, the neurobiology department at the University of Pittsburgh is more than 100 faculty members. So these are all people that are working basically with either live animals or cell cultures that are made from live animals. They're using antibodies, they're using PCR, they're using all of the basic techniques and trying to say forward their scientific hypotheses using these techniques, and then at the same time they can be shown data and not apply the same scrutiny to it. It's almost like if you put it on TV, then nobody really thinks, and it's pretty disturbing.
Indeed. The whole thing is disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a public website.
That's a very well-respected, well-known man right there.
But he kicked you out.
He's been a well-respected primate researcher for many, many years. I mean, Johns Hopkins tried to rip him away from Pitt at one point.
Really?
It's a
what
very
about Dr. Cyril Wecht? Is Wecht at University of Pittsburgh?
He could be. It's a huge place, man. And if you combine that with what Carnegie Mellon has, and it's a giant community of people here, and the UPMC is a very large medical center conglomerate. So there's a huge.
So you were with the organization for how long? How long were you part of the organization?
4 years, I guess. Since 2016 to 2021, really, is when they paid me till, but I wasn't working there anymore for the last 9 months of my contract.
So you're there for 4 years. You're on the microscope. You're doing all the research. You're working on the brain tissue, and you start speaking out on your bike rides. It's brought up in an email. Have the falling out, and next thing you know, 4 years of research, it just comes to a grinding halt. Is that right? Give or take?
Well, no, my research,
lifetime of research.
That, I mean, I mean,
they've ruined your career.
Yeah, well, that career, yes. I mean, you could say it that way. But I think I was in the end, I was destined to be a teacher, not a lab rat, and so I think in the end, some way I was going to still be pivoting. I don't know when I would have pivoted, but
okay.
As long as
it's a testament to your positive attitude that you've been able to make lemonade out of this, but they kicked you out and destroyed your career.
It's 2.5 years ago. If you'd have talked to me in 2020, I wasn't making any lemonade yet.
Got it.
I don't know.
Amazing.
Well, I appreciate
what
that.
was it? What was it that piqued your cognitive dissonance looking at the coronavirus pandemic in the early? Because you posted a video the other day of one of your bike rides in February. I think it was February 12th or 15th or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you had the spidey sense up already. You were already talking about, I don't like what I'm seeing here. And so that was a video you posted, JC on a Bike, I guess, February 15th of 2020. What was it that kind of triggered it for you? What was it that you saw?
Well, I was
something's not right here.
I was in the Netherlands in 2012 to 2016, and so that was right after Fauchier's lab had enriched or claimed to have enriched avian flu to transmit between ferrets via aerosolized version of the virus. And that laboratory, as I understand it, I think is on the 17th floor of the same building that I worked in for 4 years in the Netherlands. And so I've been to a couple of those talks. I'm saying that it's on the 17th floor because I don't remember for sure if it was. It's on a floor above where I worked, but that's all I remember.
Okay.
If you look it up and find out the building only has 16 floors, I'm not a conspiracy.
It was upstairs.
It's in the goddamn building for sure.
It was upstairs. It was upstairs.
And so I've been to a couple of these talks and I've heard them talk about it. I've heard people try to, in a non-filmed, very small audience, just local, like how would you say it? Like sometimes they have a local lecture at lunchtime, and so it would be like the lunchtime lecture, and that time Fauci gives one. So you can see him in a kind of a small audience where people will ask him the same questions, but he'll respond in a much different way. And somebody asked him a really crazy question, like, so if you have that up so high, like if there's an accident in your laboratory, it's actually perfectly set to maximally aerosolize.
Oh, wow. Right. Why not put it in the basement?
All over and his reaction to it was so nonchalant. Well, we're not, the danger of the viruses that we're making is hypothetical, and it's assumed.
But is it?
And we don't know if they're dangerous. We don't know. And so
it's not like looking down the barrel of a gun and saying, I don't know if it's dangerous. Shouldn't you presume that it's dangerous?
Right. And so they also then say, the danger really is people getting to the lab, not the lab blowing up. So we put it at the highest place we can so that it's harder for people to access. But anyway, I've been to a couple of the talks. I've seen the guy. He's a nice dude. I've stood around with like drinks in the room and listened to him talk to other people in Dutch, and they don't come off as spooks, or they don't come off as crazy, but they come off as people who are definitely believe in their work. They believe what they're doing is important somehow, that they're going to learn something that will be vital to the human race moving forward, and they're proud of what they do. But there is a level of, it's not nonchalantness, but it's almost that. It's like, the cool surfer type, but your work
arrogance?
On something a little too serious for it to be the cool surfer type.
Would you call that arrogance, hubris?
I would. It doesn't come off as arrogance. It comes off as somebody who just doesn't take seriously what he does. I don't know if that means that, kind of like a guy who does stunt riding doesn't really appreciate the fact that most people won't go on a motorcycle over a ramp. Maybe it's like that. I don't know. I don't want to call it arrogance, because definitely not. He was a very approachable
you talked about
guy.
Fauci. You talked about Fauci, Fauci, however you say it. But there's a bunch of other characters that have been around the fringe of the story as different people have been trying to figure out, well, what's really going on here? People like Ralph Barrick, people like Kawaoka.
Well, here's the thing that triggered me, dude, because it is about Fauci. Fauci had an interview in Dutch in December. Okay. And it was maybe December or January, but he got interviewed, and they asked him in Dutch, when did you first hear about the virus? And he said, sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying to tell Jason, it's Faucier, not Fauci, Fauchier. It's a guy over in Europe, not Fauci.
Oh, that's I thought you were being fancy.
No. It's another guy, Ron Faucier, Fouchier, something like that.
Yeah, Fouch.
There you go. Yeah, Fou.
Shit, I lost what I was saying.
Dutch
you were telling me that there was something that he said.
Oh yeah, so then he had this interview.
Said
yes.
that.
Fauci had this interview, and they asked him in Dutch, when did you first hear about the virus? And he said, it is the week van Sinterklaas, was it? And the week of Sinterklaas in Dutch is December 5th.
Okay.
So he was already aware of this happening long before. And when I only heard this interview in January or whatever, when I was still just barely, wow, this is interesting. Sounds like there's a virus in China or something, whatever they said on TV. It was not, I had not at all started to spin my wheels until I saw Fauci's interview. And then I was kind of like, that's weird that they're asking him to speak out about this and go on the record so early about it. And then anyway, then I just started reading. I had weeks, I was only the second week of January or something, maybe, when I really started to think, wow, this is cool. I'm going to do a bike ride about this. And then I read probably 30 or 40 papers before I felt confident that I could do a bike ride. And then still, I think on my first or second bike ride, I said that coronavirus was an influenza virus, or influenza was a coronavirus. That's what I said. And then had to correct it anyway. But it's a wild, crazy thing, because I had never really been so motivated to dive into a section of biology that I had never really dove into before. And so I knew a lot about immunology. I really liked that during my master's.
Let me pause you for a second here, JJ, because we're just about out of time. on
Oh,
the
shoot.
YouTube segment. And we're going to be continuing the conversation on the sponsor exclusive segment in just 5 minutes. People can join us on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/Crowdsource the Truth. We're going to get well beyond this introduction to JJ. You do not want to miss this. And I understand John Cullen has something to present that's supposed to blow both of our minds. I haven't seen it. JJ hasn't seen it. The audience hasn't seen it. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in.